Behind the laugh track of this forgotten sitcom lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets. A future Broadway star vanished before the pilot aired. A young Rob Reiner got physically confronted by Desi Arnaz, and one actor's salary dispute allegedly doomed the entire series. Discover the wild stories that made television history. Fact 1. Ann Sothern was almost cast instead of Kaye Ballard. When Desi Arnaz first started putting together the Mothers-in-Law in 1966, he had a very specific vision for who should star in his new sitcom. He wanted to reunite two actresses who had been friends with him and his ex-wife Lucille Ball since their days working together at RKO Pictures and MGM back in the 1930s. Arnaz approached Eve Arden for one lead role and Ann Sothern for the other, both of whom were already television veterans with successful sitcom careers behind them. Eve Arden had won an Emmy for her role in Our Miss Brooks, which ran from 1952 to 1956, and that show had actually been produced by Daisy Liu. Ann Sothern was equally accomplished, having starred in two popular sitcoms of her own, Private Secretary and The Ann Sothern Show, with the latter also being a Daisy Liu production. The plan seemed perfect on paper, since all three had deep personal and professional connections going back decades. However, when NBC executives reviewed the casting choices, they raised a significant concern. They felt that Eve Arden and Ann Sothern had comedic styles that were too similar to each other, and this similarity would hurt the dynamic that the show needed. The network wanted more contrast between the two lead characters to create the kind of comedic friction that would drive the series. As a result, NBC passed on casting Ann Sothern, and Desi Arnaz had to find a replacement. He turned to another old friend, singer and comedian Kaye Ballard, who auditioned for and won the part of Kay Buell. Ballard brought a much more volatile and explosive energy to the role compared to Sothern's style, creating the odd couple chemistry that the network was looking for all along. Fact 2. Rob Reiner got fired after fighting with Desi Arnaz. Long before Rob Reiner became famous as Meathead on All in the Family, or went on to direct classic films like When Harry Met Sally, he was a young actor trying to make it in Hollywood by taking guest spots on various sitcoms. In the late 1960s, Reiner managed to land a guest role on The Mothers-in-Law, which seemed like a great opportunity since the show was produced by the legendary Desi Arnaz. However, what should have been a routine television appearance turned into a career moment that Reiner would remember for decades. During rehearsal for his episode, Reiner started improvising some of his lines, which was a natural instinct for him since he had been performing with improv comedy groups like The Committee and felt comfortable playing around with dialogue. Unfortunately for Reiner, Desi Arnaz did not appreciate this creative freedom one bit. Arnaz became absolutely furious when he noticed Reiner changing the scripted lines, and he immediately stopped the rehearsal. He then took the confrontation outside the studio, where, according to Reiner's own recounting of the story, years later, Arnaz physically pinned him against a wall. While holding him there, Arnaz berated the young actor, repeatedly calling him amigo, while shouting about how he had paid $10,000 for the script and Reiner had no right to mess around with the expensive words that professional writers had crafted. Reiner, confident that he would find more work elsewhere, decided he wasn't going to put up with being treated that way and told Arnaz to find another actor before walking off the set. Despite this dramatic exit effectively getting him fired, Reiner's career continued without any major setbacks, and he soon landed his breakthrough role on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Fact 3. The original pilot actress still haunts the show. When The Mothers-in-Law filmed its original pilot episode, the role of Susie Hubbard, the daughter who marries into the Buell family, was played by an actress named Kay Cole. Cole went through the entire production of the pilot, filming all of her scenes alongside Eve Arden, Kaye Ballard, and the rest of the cast for the episode titled On Again, Off Again, Lohengrin. However, when NBC decided to pick up the series and move forward with a full season order, the network made the decision to replace Cole with a different actress, Deborah Wally, who had previously been one of the actresses who played Gidget in the Beach Party movies. This meant that every single scene featuring Susie Hubbard had to be reshot with Wally before the pilot episode could air as the series premiere. The production team went through the painstaking process of recreating all of Cole's scenes with Wally in her place, which was a significant undertaking since the character of Susie was central to the show's premise. Despite their best efforts to completely erase Cole from the aired version of the pilot, the editing process wasn't entirely perfect. Sharp-eyed viewers who watch closely can actually catch a brief glimpse of Kaye Cole in the final shot right before the end credits roll, creating a strange, ghost-like presence in the episode. This small oversight turned into an interesting piece of television history, especially since Kaye Cole went on to have a successful career in her own right, appearing in the original Broadway cast of A Chorus Line just a few years later, which became one of the most celebrated musicals of all time. Fact 4. One salary dispute killed the entire series. After The Mothers-in-Law completed its first season with moderate success, NBC agreed to renew the show for a second season, but with one major condition attached. The network insisted that all production costs and salaries had to remain frozen at the same level as the first season, which meant no raises for anyone involved with the show. This was an unusual request that put Desi Arnaz in a difficult position, since many of the cast and crew had contracts that included automatic salary increases for a second season renewal. Arnaz went to every single person working on the show, explaining the situation and pleading with them to accept the frozen salaries so that the series could continue and everyone could keep their jobs. He managed to get agreements from nearly everyone involved, from the writers and crew members to most of the main cast, all of whom understood that the alternative was cancellation and unemployment for dozens of people. However, there was one holdout who refused to budge. Roger C. Carmel, who played Roger Buell, the husband of Kaye Ballard's character, stood firm on his contractual right to receive a raise for the second season. At the time, Carmel was already earning a respectable $2,000 per week, and his contract clearly stated he was entitled to more money if the show was renewed. Despite Arnaz personally appealing to him and explaining how his decision would affect everyone else, Carmel would not compromise on this point. As a result, Arnaz released Carmel from the show and replaced him with Richard Deacon for the entire second season. The replacement proved disastrous for the series, as the ratings immediately sank and the show was canceled after season 2 ended. To make matters worse for Carmel, he found himself effectively blackballed from the television industry for several years afterward. Fact 5. Characters and actors shared the same names. The Mothers-in-Law had an unusual quirk that set it apart from most television shows of its era, and it's something that viewers might not have even noticed unless they paid close attention to both the opening credits and the dialogue. Almost every main character on the show had the exact same first name as the actor who played them, creating a strange blurring of the line between the performers and their roles. Eve Arden played a character named Eve Hubbard. Kaye Ballard played Kaye Buell. Herbert Rudley played Herb Hubbard, and Jerry Fogel played Jerry Buell. Even in the first season, Roger C. Carmel played a character named Roger C. Buell, keeping not just his first name, but also his middle initial. This pattern was so consistent across the main cast that it became one of the rare occasions in television history where a show used this naming convention so extensively. The only exceptions to this rule were the actress who played the daughter Susie, since Deborah Wally clearly didn't share her character's name, and Richard Deacon, who took over the role of Roger Buell in the second season while keeping his own first name of Richard. This naming choice might have been a deliberate decision by the producers to make the show feel more natural and spontaneous, or it could have simply been a way to make life easier during filming by reducing the chances of actors accidentally using each other's real names during takes. Whatever the reason behind it, the matching names created an interesting dynamic where the actors were essentially playing slightly fictionalized versions of themselves, which was an uncommon approach for sitcoms during the 1960s when most shows kept a clear distinction between actors and their characters. Fact 6. Kaye Ballard's character had her real maiden name. While many of the actors on The Mothers-in-Law shared first names with their characters, Kaye Ballard had an even deeper personal connection to her role that went beyond just her first name. The actress was born Catherine Gloria Ballata, the daughter of Italian immigrant parents who came to the United States from Calabria, a region in southern Italy. She adopted the stage name Kaye Ballard early in her career when she began performing professionally, but the show's creators decided to incorporate her real birth name into her character in a surprisingly personal way. On the show, Kaye Ballard played Catherine Josephina Buell, and the character's maiden name before marriage was given as Catherine Josephina Ballata, which was almost identical to the actress's actual birth name. This wasn't just a coincidence or a minor detail that appeared once in the series. The character's Italian heritage and maiden name were woven into the fabric of the show, with Kaye Buell frequently speaking Italian phrases, referencing her ethnic background and displaying personality traits that drew directly from Ballard's own life experiences. In fact, Ballard later confirmed in interviews that many of her character's catchphrases, including expressions like, "Oh, really?" and "good luck with your mouth," were inspired by things her own mother used to say when Ballard was growing up. This blending of the actress's real identity with her fictional character created an unusually authentic performance, where Ballard was essentially playing a version of herself, or at least drawing heavily from her own family history and cultural background. The decision to use her actual maiden name added yet another layer to this already personal portrayal, making the character feel more genuine and lived in than typical sitcom roles of that era. Fact 7. Filmed live when others used laugh tracks. During the 1960s, the standard practice for most television sitcoms was to film episodes on a closed set without any audience present, and then add canned laughter during the editing process to create the illusion that people were watching and reacting to the jokes. This technique had become so common that viewers had grown accustomed to hearing the same pre-recorded laugh tracks on show after show, even though no actual people were laughing at the time of filming. The Mothers-in-Law took a completely different approach that set it apart from the majority of sitcoms airing during that period. The show was filmed using multiple cameras in front of a live studio audience, which meant that real people were sitting in the studio watching the actors perform each scene and responding with genuine laughter and reactions. This production method was actually quite rare for new sitcoms launching in 1967, with The Mothers-in-Law being one of only 3 new shows that year to use this multi-camera live audience format. The decision made sense given the show's creative roots, since Desi Arnaz had pioneered this exact filming technique years earlier when he produced I Love Lucy, and both of the show's lead actresses, Eve Arden and Kaye Ballard, came from theatrical backgrounds where performing in front of live audiences was second nature to them. However, even though the show filmed with real audiences present, the production team still used artificial laugh tracks during post-production to enhance or sweeten the audience reactions, filling in any gaps where jokes might have been missed or where the live audience response wasn't strong enough. This combination of genuine audience laughter mixed with added sound effects created a hybrid approach that gave the show a more authentic feel than purely canned laughter, while still maintaining control over the final audio. Fact 8. The garage door stunt was real slapstick. One of the most memorable physical comedy moments from The Mothers-in-Law came from an episode that took full advantage of the show's unique setting, where the newlywed couple lived in a converted garage apartment behind the Hubbard family home. The premise of the show revolved around 2 meddling mothers who constantly interfered in their children's lives, and in this particular episode, Eve Arden and Kaye Ballard's characters decided to spy on the young couple by climbing up and hanging onto the handles of the garage door so they could peer through the windows and see what was happening inside the apartment. The comedy setup was simple but effective, playing on the mothers' inability to mind their own business and their willingness to go to ridiculous lengths to keep tabs on their kids. What made this scene particularly funny and impressive was that the physical comedy was entirely real, with no special effects or camera tricks involved. While Eve and Kaye were hanging there, clinging to the door handles and trying to look through the windows without being noticed, someone inside the apartment activated the automatic garage door opener. This caused the door to start rising upward on its track, and both actresses went right along with it, rising higher and higher into the air while still desperately holding onto the handles. The stunt required genuine physical effort and coordination from both women, and it showcased their commitment to old-school slapstick comedy in a way that demonstrated their theatrical training and willingness to fully commit to a gag. The scene became one of the most talked-about moments from the series and perfectly captured the absurd lengths these mothers would go to in order to meddle in their children's marriage. Fact 9. Garage rock legends appeared as the Warts. In a 1968 episode titled How Not to Manage a Rock Group, the mothers-in-law featured a guest appearance by the Seeds, a garage rock band that had achieved significant success with their song Pushin' Too Hard, which peaked at number 36 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1967. The song has since been recognized as an influential proto-punk classic and is even featured in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's exhibit of the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. On the show, the Seeds appeared under the fictional band name The Warts, playing a group of hippie musicians that the character Jerry Buell decides to manage after convincing his parents and in-laws to invest $500 for studio recording time. The episode became infamous for showcasing an awkward generational culture clash as the straight-laced parents tried to understand and work with the long-haired rock musicians. The mothers-in-law attempted to help the band succeed by suggesting they get haircuts, wear tuxedos, and perform more traditional songs, completely missing the point of what made the group authentic and appealing to young audiences. The Seeds performed their actual hit song during the episode, but the context made it feel jarring and out of place in the middle of a square sitcom that was already considered old-fashioned even by 1967 standards. Later reviews and retrospective looks at the series often describe this episode as cringeworthy, pointing to it as an example of how hopelessly outdated the show felt during an era of rapid cultural change. Despite the awkwardness, the episode has become a curious time capsule moment where an important rock band intersected with traditional family sitcom television. Fact 10. Eve Arden refused the Mother Hubbard name. One of the recurring jokes throughout The Mothers-in-Law centered around Eve Arden's character and her strong objection to being called by what should have been her natural mother-in-law title. Since Eve's character was named Eve Hubbard and her daughter Susie had married Jerry Buell, it would have been perfectly appropriate for Jerry to call his mother-in-law Mother Hubbard, just as Susie was allowed to call her mother-in-law Mother Buell. However, Eve absolutely refused to let Jerry use this form of address, and the show turned her objection into a running gag that appeared throughout both seasons of the series. The reason for Eve's refusal was her association of the name with the famous Old Mother Hubbard nursery rhyme, which dates back to 1805 and tells the story of an old woman who goes to her cupboard to get her dog a bone, but finds the cupboard bare. Eve's character felt that being called Mother Hubbard would make her sound old and frumpy, like the character from the children's poem, which didn't fit with her self-image as a sophisticated and youthful woman. This vanity about her age and appearance became part of her character's personality, showing that despite being a meddling and overbearing mother-in-law, she still cared deeply about how she was perceived by others. The show even included moments where Eve would acknowledge that Mother Hubbard was technically accurate, but still insisted it was better than other alternatives, once joking that she almost married a man named McCree, which would have made her Mother McCree in reference to a 1910 song. The ongoing joke highlighted the generational tensions and personal insecurities that added depth to what could have been a one-dimensional sitcom character. Fact 11. Desi Arnaz played a wrong-number matador. Desi Arnaz didn't just produce and direct The Mothers-in-Law, he also stepped in front of the camera to play a recurring character across 4 episodes of the series. Arnaz portrayed Rafael Delgado y de Acha III, a Spanish bullfighter from Barcelona who became an unlikely friend of both families through one of the most absurd circumstances the show ever created. The character's introduction came in an episode where Eve and Kaye went to a department store to return a duplicate wedding gift for the newlyweds, but they ended up getting locked inside the building after it closed for the night. The two mothers-in-law had been banned from using their own home phones because they kept calling the honeymoon couple too much, so they had already spent $15.70 talking to their kids on a payphone earlier in the day. When they found themselves trapped in the store with only 1 dime left, they desperately tried to call their husbands for help, but accidentally dialed an international number instead, waking up a sleeping matador in Barcelona, Spain. Rather than simply hanging up, the mothers-in-law convinced this complete stranger to relay their emergency message to their families back home, and somehow this bizarre wrong number connection blossomed into a friendship. Raphael later appeared in subsequent episodes visiting the families in California, even bringing his colorful entourage along with him and causing quite a spectacle in their suburban neighborhood with late-night parties. Arnaz used these appearances to showcase his musical talents, performing songs like I Love You and the Straw Hat Song during the episodes, giving viewers a chance to see him perform in ways that reminded them of his earlier work on I Love Lucy. Fact 12. The show inspired Dharma and Greg 3 decades later. Although The Mothers-in-Law only ran for 2 seasons and quickly faded into obscurity after it left the air in 1969, the show's basic premise proved to have lasting appeal that would resurface decades later. When the sitcom Dharma and Greg premiered on ABC in 1997, many longtime television fans and reviewers immediately recognized striking similarities between the 2 shows. Both series centered on a young couple from dramatically different backgrounds who get married quickly, bringing together 2 families who have completely opposite lifestyles and values, which then creates ongoing comedic conflict as the parents struggle to accept their new in-laws and constantly meddle in their children's lives. In The Mothers-in-Law, the Hubbards were portrayed as sophisticated and straight-laced, while the Buells were more unconventional and free-spirited, creating the culture clash that drove most of the show's humor. Dharma and Greg used essentially the same formula 3 decades later, with Dharma's hippie parents clashing with Greg's wealthy and conservative family after the couple married on their first date. The parallels were strong enough that several viewers who remembered The Mothers-in-Law from its original run or from reruns in the 1970s pointed out that Dharma and Greg felt like a modern remake of the older show, even though there was never any official acknowledgement of the connection. The comparison highlights how certain sitcom formulas remain effective across different generations, and how the comedy potential of mismatched families forced together by marriage is a timeless concept that can be updated for new audiences. While Dharma and Greg became much more successful and ran for 5 seasons, it owed a creative debt to the largely forgotten show that pioneered this particular family dynamic decades earlier. Fact 13. It was Desi Arnaz's final television series. The Mothers-in-Law holds a significant place in television history as the final series that Desi Arnaz would ever produce, bringing to a close a remarkable career that had fundamentally changed the medium of television. Arnaz had first revolutionized the industry in the early 1950s when he produced and starred in I Love Lucy, alongside his then-wife Lucille Ball, creating innovations like the multi-camera setup filmed before a live audience and establishing the rerun as a standard practice in television. His production company, Desilu, went on to become one of the most successful studios in Hollywood, producing not only Lucy's various shows, but also hit series like The Untouchables, Mission Impossible, and Star Trek. By the time The Mothers-in-Law premiered in 1967, Arnaz had been divorced from Ball for several years and had sold his share of Desilu to her, but he still maintained his reputation as one of television's most important figures. He poured considerable effort into The Mothers-in-Law, not only serving as executive producer, but also directing many episodes personally and even appearing on screen in his recurring role as the Matador Raphael. Despite his involvement and the talented cast he assembled, the show struggled in the ratings and was canceled after just 2 seasons in 1969. After this cancellation, Arnaz stepped away from television production entirely, never developing or producing another series. He spent his remaining years largely in retirement, occasionally making public appearances, but never returning to the industry where he had once been such a transformative force. The end of The Mothers-in-Law therefore marked not just the cancellation of another sitcom, but the conclusion of an era in television history. Fact 14. The show lost to The Bill Cosby Show. Years after The Mothers-in-Law ended its run, Kaye Ballard revealed the real reason behind the show's cancellation, and it had less to do with ratings or quality than with network programming decisions. In interviews and commentary recorded for the DVD release of The Doris Day Show, where Ballard had moved on to play a recurring character, she explained that NBC and the show's sponsor Procter & Gamble had made a deliberate choice to cancel The Mothers-in-Law specifically to clear a time slot for The Bill Cosby Show during the 1969 to 1970 television season. This wasn't a case of a struggling show being replaced by something the network hoped would perform better, but rather a strategic programming move where one show was simply pushed aside to make room for what the network and sponsor viewed as a more valuable property. Bill Cosby was coming off enormous success with the espionage series I Spy, where he had become the first African-American actor to star in a dramatic television series and had won 3 consecutive Emmy Awards for his performance. The network clearly believed that a sitcom starring Cosby would be a major hit and was worth sacrificing The Mothers-in-Law to secure a place on the schedule. This behind-the-scenes maneuvering meant that the show's fate was sealed regardless of any creative improvements or cast changes that might have been made for a potential third season. The decision highlights how television production during this era was heavily influenced by sponsor demands and network politics, with shows being canceled not necessarily because they failed, but because something else was deemed more important to the business interests involved. Fact 15. It had perfect placement but still failed. NBC gave The Mothers-in-Law what should have been an ideal time slot that any television producer would have envied, scheduling the show on Sunday nights at 8:30 in the evening, right between 2 of the network's biggest hits. The show aired directly after Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, which was a family-friendly institution that drew massive audiences every week, and immediately before Bonanza, which was one of the most popular westerns in television history and consistently ranked among the top shows on all of television. This kind of placement is known as a strong lead-in and lead-out situation, where viewers who are already watching one hit show are likely to keep their televisions tuned to the same channel and continue watching whatever comes on. Next, despite this incredibly advantageous position in the schedule, The Mothers-in-Law never managed to capture a large enough audience to be considered a success. In its first season, the show ranked 37th in the overall ratings with an 18.8 rating. And in its second season, it actually dropped slightly to 40th place with a 19.4 rating. These numbers meant the show never even came close to cracking the top 30 programs on television, which was a disappointing performance given the built-in audience it should have inherited from the shows surrounding it. The failure to capitalize on such prime placement suggests that viewers were actively choosing to change the channel or turn off their televisions rather than watch The Mothers-in-Law, indicating that the show's old-fashioned style of comedy simply wasn't connecting with audiences in the late 1960s, even when they had every reason to give it a chance.